Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. There is a recording. You are please required to press the permission for recording button. Thank you, Martin. Welcome to session 4, New Ways of Teaching. I'm very honored that Marta has allowed us from South Africa to chair a session, even though there's only 3 of us here from our country. We look forward to 4 presentations from Singapore all the way to Italy, and a lot from the East, China, and Singapore National University Museum again. Martin, can I ask you to please pull up the slide on the housekeeping rules, just to get everybody. Thank you very much. For those of you who perhaps have just joined the conference, the hashtag UMAC-Universeum 2021 is one word for sharing on Twitter. Please note that all our sessions are recorded and your permission is required. And please be cognizant of other people, and when someone else is talking, ensure that you mute your microphone at all times other than the speaker. I'm also having difficulty trying to see how many participants, but we currently have 44 participants for this session. Also, please do insert your full name or your organization's acronym, and you can activate the live transcript. This is very useful for those of you whose English is not your first language. That appears on the right-hand corner or the right-hand side of Zoom. It's, I think, a new setting. Well, we're not used to Zoom from South Africa. And please leave your comments or questions to the end of each paper. I will be very strict with timing for 10 minutes for each paper, and then some questions afterwards. Please, if you raise your hand electronically at the bottom of the screen, please try and keep your question to 1 minute and very brief. And of course, we welcome reactions as the speakers present. So we are seeing live how people are reacting to each and every speaker. Today, I'm going to, the first person from session 4, New Ways of Teaching, is Marianne Lim. I just can't see her on my screen.
I'm here.
There you are. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Marianne Lim is from the National University of Singapore. Her face is familiar since she's been here on the conference program, and she's an outreach senior executive at the NAS Museum, where she develops public programs. She'll be talking to us about reorientating digital futures in museum programming. And thank you very much, Marianne. Please go ahead. We are eager to hear what you have to say.
Okay, let me share my slides and then we can get going. Yeah, so today I'll be talking about reorienting digital futures in museum programming. So before we begin, I'll just like to set some really short context because I'm mindful that I only have 10 minutes and I think I have a lot of slides for today. The NUS Museum has been around since 1955, and we're located in Singapore, in the National University of Singapore. Our main, I guess, objectives can be neatly summed up into this phrase that we facilitate the intellectual and cultural life within and beyond the university with a distinct focus on Asia. So we work very closely with all the different faculties in the university to aid in the production of knowledge in the university. So at the museum's core is actually our collections and curation. So the collections forms part of the museum's institutional history and the foundation of the museum's work. And the curation forms the exhibitionary content and the modes of research and inquiry. So all our different outreach programs, from the public programs to internship program to the module collaborations, they all kind of flow directly from the collections and curations and the curatorial work. So I guess a fundamental impetus that draws the relationship between collection/curation to these different modes of outreach is not the simple need to maintain access for curious viewers, leisure, and enlightenment, although it can be those things, but it's also driven by access as a mode of pedagogy to construe new knowledges in the museum and in the university itself. So for the purposes of this presentation, I will be focusing only on the first two, with the public programs in the form of the film program and the internship program. So before we get ahead of ourselves, I guess the main point of inquiry here is also to examine the question of the digital and its place in the museum's programs. So the need for the digital is of course precipitated by two events, which I'm sure is very familiar with everyone here today. So one is an increasing demand for digital engagement by students and faculty. So for students, the digital is increasingly, a large part of their daily lives and their ways of accessing information, knowledges, and the same goes for faculty as well. And secondly, of course, is that with no physical access to the museum due to, the restrictions from COVID-19, the most obvious alternative for access would be through remote and digital means. But I guess the big question here is, where do we start with this? Because the question of the digital is a very broad one. And there are many options to choose from. The list really goes on into what the possibilities out there are. So for us at the NUS Museum, a place to start would be our interest in art pedagogy and what it can be, and how we have been thinking about pedagogy is, of course, this is not the only definition there is out there, but it's quite close to this seminal text from Ellen de Souza on how art can be thought. So in this text, he starts by re-examining the concept of art before landing on how we cannot describe what it does do, but what it can do. So in light of this, if art cannot be defined in terms of what it does do, then for de Souza, art, strictly speaking, isn't taught. So what are taught instead are technical, conceptual, and critical methods to pursue art. In this manner, the function of art pedagogy is thus not just a means to provide a kind of once and for all answer, or that arrives at a task that one can complete, but in the pursuit of art, art will always mean something different for you at any given point in time. And so art pedagogy provides its students with different ways to think through different disciplines on how to approach art. So as de Souza says, how we experience the artwork, what it potentially means to us, and how it comes into meaning occurs through negotiations of complex intersections that call for equally complex articulations rather than self-comforting variations of transcendence. So these intersections here denote quite a few things. They are between the works and the viewer's kind of embodied presence with it. The viewer's prior experiences and knowledge, the viewer's assumptions of the work's context, and the larger site of viewing. So through all these complexities that mediate the individual experience, the meaning of the artwork and the experience of the artwork comes into being collectively. So keeping this in mind, I'll move on to the strategies and case studies that we have adopted for our programs. So to be clear from what I was saying earlier, within the museum itself, the question of the digital is not isolated from broader programming or exhibitionary efforts, and the digital is not invoked, for the sake of. Instead, it acts as responses to opportunities and needs, or forms extensions that will connect many different elements of our museum's programming and processes, while undergirded and necessitated by the impetus of education. So our digital strategy can thus be subdivided into three prongs. The first is continuity, and the most obvious prong that was briefly covered above, because the digital helps us continue our work even within extenuating circumstances such as COVID, but also other sorts of circumstances in the future. The second prong is our audiences. The digital creates opportunities to expand collaborator and audience reach beyond our physical limitations, which I will highlight a little bit more about later, and benefits us in our role as knowledge producers. So the last is mobilization, where there is consolidation and mobilization of older content that may not necessarily have been digitized, or can also be in digital formats already for and all these is for newer platforms. So the first case study that I want to look at is our film program Turf Wars, which ran for 4 days in January this year, where there was still some but minimal access to the museum. So it was conceived as a postscript to our exhibition Tropics and Many Consequence, which was an inquiry by artist Ken Chan, together with the museum, into the tropical imaginaries as manifest in art history and contemporary art within the Southeast Asian region. So here the curatorial gestures were present in the collection, juxtaposed alongside the artist's work. So the film program itself does not echo the exhibition's concerns, but explores tangents using the exhibition as a point of departure. So for Turf Wars, it explored the meaning and tensions of territory in Southeast Asia by bringing into conversation different elements, which I will go through later. And it was a 3-part feature film screening series with all these other elements, and presented as a hybrid program with both physical and digital components. Okay, so you can view some of the various elements that the film program consisted of beyond just the film screenings. So the main site here was the Squarespace website, which you can see on the right, where the screenings were held, and links to the various other elements could be found hosted on this website. There were also other efforts on social media through an archival series that examined Ken Chan's practice, as well as the other works from our collection present in the exhibition. And there were also other Instagram stories, Facebook posts, with programmers' notes, quizzes, and so on, and an opening live stream conversation. And a portion of the film program was held in the museum itself, physically, with the screening room that screened supplementary short films on top of the feature films. And all other materials could be found on the website. So lastly, there was also a film club, which you can see right at the bottom. It was held as a live event with a small audience to unpack the films and other research interests led by various speakers, such as artists, curators, and researchers. So the first thing I want to draw your attention to is the social media element of the film program. So our social media efforts were not contained to just, announcements of what the film program were, but it featured works from the artist and museum collection to draw links to the film program, ensuring that engagement with the film program flowed back to engagement with the exhibition itself, even when the museum was not so accessible. So there was also mobilization of content to encourage audiences to find new ways to view the exhibition material, not just as objects in themselves, but as having, these sorts of variegated connections to the films that they were watching. The Facebook live stream also helped to reach audiences who may not have been in touch with the museum itself. And it helped us gain traction for the program too. So the feature films and short film screenings, by their very nature being kind of tangential inquiries into the exhibition's concerns, also provided ways for mobilization. So the films posit another layer of interpretation and understanding that helps to facilitate cross-disciplinary engagement with audiences of all backgrounds without privileging any one experience or background, right? So the hybrid program also allowed continuity across different platforms, both physical and digital, which ensures continuity across the future and in all kinds of circumstances. Yeah, and oh, sorry, 1 second. Yeah, so with these 3 points that I have kind of circled here, these references and materials are gestures towards older and other exhibitions and programs by the museum. So by including these materials and resources on the website, alongside other links to external readings and so on, it allowed for us to mobilize our older content for sustained relevance while gesturing towards continuity and research and criticality built across time. Yeah, so lastly, there is also sustained audience engagement through community-generated response in the community boards, which were both in our screening room, so a physical site, as well as on a digital page on the website, where audiences could input their responses and thoughts through simple prompts about the topics and the films. The film club, which I highlighted earlier as well, is also another aspect where speakers will present on some research or materials related to the film program, and the audiences will respond with their own material and critique. So here, criticality as a primary mode of art pedagogy is encouraged, where critique is a participatory event rather than a passive one, which then not only just increases knowledge for participants in a didactic way, but also feeds back into the museum's own practice and research. Knowledge building and production is thus a more democratic process where audiences can come in and participate in sharing and building of new knowledges, which contribute to the museum's ongoing research efforts, since this content will be mobilized in future for other uses as well. Yep. So in summary, yeah, these are a few things that I wanted to highlight. That it's important to recognize continuity beyond the urgencies of the COVID-19. Yeah, where digital efforts do not just become detritus of this particular circumstance, but can be reused and repurposed for future programs. And the digital space and programs do not simply just form extensions of the art space and classroom, but are essential to an art pedagogy that fosters interdisciplinary connections, encourages the viewers' experiences and knowledge to come at the forefront of these intersections. Yeah, so this is what came out of our film club. So I think it's just to show how it's quite difficult to quantify the quality of what has been learned, but yeah, a closer look at the film program and the film club, we see that there were a lot of audiences that came together from different backgrounds who participate in the film program and who contributed a lot to the kinds of discussions, the very rich discussions that came out of this film program. So I'll take a very brief look at the internship program before wrapping up. So the internship program has been around since 2008. It's offered across our vacation period. It comprises of a few segments, but the most important one that I want to focus on is the parallel program, which focuses on particular modes of inquiry or text. And pertains to key issues in museology in the form of workshop and presentation sessions. So yeah, so this year what we did was to focus on the museum's histories and context while exploring nascent and latent responses to the museum today as means to speculate gaps in our collection curation, knowledges and access. So this was held completely online. Yeah, so I just want to take a look at the internship program, how it unfolded, and it unfolded in these sessions. So the first session, we got the interns to visit a museum without guidance and to write down their own responses and questions. The second session, we had a reading group. The third session, it was to talk about the online experience. So we got the interns to share a little bit more about past digital projects that they've done research on, with a sharing from the curators. In session 4, we did a check-in with the interns and introduce a final project to them. And in session 5, we got them to visit other museums around Singapore as well. So what undergirded this entire session are 2 digital platforms, which are the Miro board, which is a mind mapping tool.
Sorry, Marianne, could you please wrap up for the sake of other guests, please?
Oh, okay. So sorry.
Your time. Or please consider your time. Thank you.
Okay, sure. Yeah, so we have
1 minute.
Okay, so we have the Miro board and Notion board. Yeah, so I just want to show how the Miro board allows for collaboration between interns, and it helps them to track their responses across the duration of the internship. And yeah, these student presentation focus sessions with minimal exposition from the facilitators themselves allow them to kind of construe meanings for themselves around the museum and its objects. And it's useful for us and for the interns to visually chart how these interpretations and meanings have been accrued across time as well. And the second thing is Notion. So we consolidate all of our internship on this page there's a reading list, there's a museum directory, and so on and so forth. And things that allow the interns to kind of use Notion as the main site rather than having the museum as a site, because we were all working from home, so we didn't have that kind of access. So they can use Notion as a venue to make their connections and observations across different things. Yeah, so there was a final project at the end. And 2 groups managed to produce an alternative guide to the museum, which was kind of an accumulation of their 3 months of learning. Sorry, so there's a video. And yeah, so just to conclude, I guess, beyond just immediate responses to these circumstances, digital strategies have to consider the museum's work and processes in the long term and enhance aspects of engagement related to arts pedagogy and experimentation.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I apologize for interrupting. I understand that it was a lot of information, a very fascinating, detailed discussion. I'd certainly recommend that that information be considered for a journal, because I can see a lot amount of research has gone into that. And definitely, I really like the idea that people must not develop their digital strategies separate from their curatorial strategies, and often they do that. And the fact that your digital is in fact part of your curatorial strategy. I'm going to move on to, I had asked Martin how we're doing on time, because I have several times.
Sorry, you're doing good.
Okay. I was just worried because we have to finish by 1, but I see we are one less paper according to my records. But Marianne, thank you very much. Let me see if there's any questions for Marianne. Or do we, any direct questions? Please put them in the chat. Sorry, Martin, do we do the questions now or do we move to the next speaker?
I think we decided in our pre-session that we just do all the talks and then we can have a discussion
all right.
about all the talks.
Okay.
Together.
For those of you, please keep Marianne's, whatever you've got fresh in your mind, put into the chat and we'll deal with them after the presentations. Right, moving on to Sophia. Welcome to our next speaker, who is Sophia Tomadil. I hope I have pronounced it correctly. Yes. Thomaidou. She is from the University of Naples, Federico II from Italy, and we look forward to her talk on museums and the new normal and how one responds to e-learning. Over to you, Sophia.
Thank you very much. Let me just, share my screen.
Share your screen.
Let me share my screen. No. Why I cannot share my screen?
It takes a while.
Okay.
There you are. It's coming up. Thank you.
Okay, you see it now, right?
Yes.
Perfect. Absolutely perfect.
Okay, so good morning also from me. As you introduced me before, I work at Federico Web Learning, the e-learning center from the University of Naples, Federico II in Italy. And today we'll talk about a little bit the museum digital education and how it can look in a post-pandemic world. We will see why and how the use of massive open online courses can be a core part of a digital learning strategy for university museums. So let's start with what happened during COVID. So during the global pandemic, we have more than 90% of museums being closed. We have 70% of the European museums reported an income loss between 1,000 to 30,000 euros per week in 2020. We have 50% of museums in Europe that say that do not have professional figures with digital skills. But if we have to identify a single positive aspect by the pandemic, we could say that at least 15% of museums have increased their digital activities, a figure that can raise to almost 50% if we consider social media channels that are actually the most popular offered during the COVID-19. What about the higher education sector? So here we have new modes of teaching and learning, the increase of online learning with the hybrid teaching to be the most popular form. We saw that most countries do not have decrease on enrollments. We have a huge reduce of international mobility due to COVID restrictions. We have an increase of inequality and disruption of research with the cancellation of teaching and research activities due to COVID pandemic. Let's focus now on the target of university museums. We have the university students of the institution that museum is with. We have institutions and other institutions and stakeholders that work closely with the museum. And then we have the so-called global citizenship, by meaning local communities and a wider global audience. So university museums have this unique position within the cultural sector and higher education sector that can bring many benefits, but on the other hand, has many challenges and needs that distinguish the museums from other cultural institutions. And I'm saying that because we have many critical issues in museum digitalization, lack of budget, new job profiles that are coming out, fast changes, the need for reskilling and upskilling, and the lack of digital literacy to many professionals. So let's imagine for a few minutes a museum like an orchestra and all these tools like instruments in order to reach our goals. All of you have heard and have worked and have experienced this period, all these digital tools like virtual tours, AR and VR, digital archives, live streaming events, social media initiatives, online events. So we could talk for each of them a whole conference in order to say all of our experiences with these new tools. But today I would like to focus and to have my contribution on these one tool. Of course, I'm talking about massive open online courses, because I think that it could work and it could be an instrument that could really help university museum for the next years as a high quality education tool for digital transformation on university museums. And of course, I'm not saying that digital tools, and especially MOOCs, the production of a MOOC, it's actually expensive, as the internet is expensive itself. Like these tools are not easy to produce them, and they are cost actually a lot. But at the same point, I think that they are a tool that could really work for university museums. So let's go back a little bit to how to their evolution. So MOOCs came back to 2011 when Stanford University launched its 3 online courses for free, with the first one to be Introduction to Artificial Intelligence, that does more than 160,000 students in the first few weeks. After that, we have 2012, which is the year of MOOC by the New York Times, and we have many MOOC platforms that are coming out. We have over 1,080 million learners to the main MOOC platforms, more than 900 universities involved, and more than 60 MOOC-based degrees. So we have also many museums that are using MOOCs to their educational portfolio around the world. We have Centre Pompidou, National Museum of Liverpool, Smithsonian, Reina Sofia, also the Museum of Modern Art with more than 1 million learners on its 9 online courses. Something we haven't seen is, at least in the main MOOC platforms, university museums producing their own MOOCs in collaboration with their universities. We have seen a little bit of movement. We see some museum professionals from the university museums to start considering this trend, as for example, the Museum of Modern Art of the University of Michigan, that they see this trend and they see how they could explore it and experiment with new MOOCs. So let's see why massive open online courses for university museums. For audience development, in order to reach a new and wider audience by breaking out physical and geographical barriers of university museums. If we go back to the target that we said that we have university students, we could combine university students in order to do blended learning experiences, that they are a new trend and that they are here to stay for higher education institutions, or for fully online experiences in order to reach a new and wider audience. Then for costume program and data analysis. So museums could analyze immediately accessible data of their students, analyze their behavior, their learning experience. They could test and develop pilot programs, and based on that data, build new customized products, both for online and for offline experiences. Then we go to interaction and communication. So online learning reflects on how our visitors communicate. So as the use of digital communication means are increasing, museums should be responsive not only on how these new technologies work, but how they are transforming the ways that people interact and communicate. So MOOCs, with a huge rise of social media channels, more and more students need a safe and social space in order to interact and learn and reflect. So MOOCs for museums have the possibility of creating communities with the most active learners, create a loyal audience, and also co-create processes for new projects as well. Then for engaging learning. So we have seen various digital tools used this 1.5 years. Many of them were not so effective as we were expecting. So MOOCs is not about have a digital tool, but they are built on a very well-structured path based on an instructional design with specific objectives, specific learning outcomes, dictated by the needs of the target audiences, which allows an engaging and collaborative learning for a high-quality learning path. Then I'm moving to research optimization. So the creation of a MOOC allows us an easier use of content that already is produced on other digital channels of the university museum, but also for the higher institution as well. So the costs of implementation can be amortized by the use of MOOC in the next editions, which not require a major update. And finally, for sustainability. So now we have many online MOOC platforms that have different business models. Of course, MOOCs are always for free, but they can students can acquire also a certificate. So by selling certificates to a wider audience, museums could tap into new resources of funding, reinvest the income, and expand their digital offerings. And thank you very much. Should I close?
Thank you very much, Sophia.
Very much.
MOOC is something new to us here in South Africa. although we're already doing it. We're already doing it. Thank you very much. I just want to have a look. Please keep Sophia's points of view from Italy, the University of Naples, back in your mind for your questions. I appreciate it. It's a new way of responding to e-learning, and I hope that we have some more questions directed for you at the end of this session. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Right, let's move on to our next speaker, which is this is a real tongue twister for me. But Zhao and Wang Nianci and Congting. Let me just see, where are you? There you are. Thank you. Have I got the wrong speaker? Martin, I just want to make Zhao as the speaker.
Sure.
There you are. There you are. Thank you. Thank you. Zhao is from the University of the Electronic Science and Technology Museum of China. Am I correct that you'll be presenting on your own on behalf of your other colleagues? Your speaker needs to be on. So, please put your microphone on. Martin, we're having difficulty.
Yes, I see, but I'm not sure. Zhao, your microphone is off. Do you hear us?
Zhao, you're on mute.
Yes.
Oh, he's giving us sign language.
Okay, so
please start sharing your screen. So, we can't hear you at all. Am I the only participant that can't hear him?
No, I think
none of us can hear us.
No, I don't think anybody can hear, and also the screen sharing is not starting. So I have a feeling that we have a technical
issue over here.
Greater technical issues with the connection.
No, but I think it's his end, Martin. So
yes,
okay,
yes.
If you can hear us, maybe you can restart your computer to see if that helps.
I'm going to put it in the chat, because maybe he can see that. Thank you, Maria, for stepping in. I think he has to restart, right? I'm just emailing him.
Okay. There is again. Great.
Yes, can you hear me now? Okay.
Yes.
Apologize. Okay.
Technical issue. Thank you so much. I'm glad we could hear you, and you can share your screen.
Okay.
Please put in presenter view. Thank you very much.
Okay. So guys, you can see my slides, right?
Yes, we can.
Okay. Yes, apologize for the technical problems just now. And hello, everyone. My name is Zhao from Electronic Science and Technology Museum from China. I would like to share our project, Museum Plus Class, a new engineering education model. First, I will give a brief introduction of our museum. Our museum locates in Chengdu city, which is the center of Western China, the base of electronic industry since 1950s. And our university, UESTC, owns the first position of the 2 disciplines in China discipline ranking. Our museum opened in 2016. It's the first museum to record the whole electronic industry of China. So, okay, back to the topic. Why do we start this project, the Museum Plus Class? Because in traditional engineering education system, there exists some problems. First, the background, theory, and practice of disciplines are not integrated closely, especially as the background is weak, especially as a history review. So second, the discipline classification is too specific so that students, sometimes they are only good at the lateral field. It will cause a problem that they are lack of ability to solve the engineering problems in practice independently. In our museum, the ESTM, there are over 14,000 connections in our electronic science and technology field. So when our museum was established, we were thinking that we should do more to use the resources in our museum for teaching and education and to solve the problems and how to do it. We can explore different significance of connections, like in the historical dimension, the life circle of the connection itself, both theoretical and practical significance and the interdisciplinary application. At last, we can connect our university museum with other university institutions and society. So what is the Museum Plus class? It includes 2 series of classes. One is that we cooperate with some courses and invite them to open in the museum. 4 types of courses in total: discipline history courses, introduction courses of major, engineering courses, and ethics courses. The other one is the history of electronic science and technology course held by our museum. The first type is the 4 discipline history courses, which are mainly for the freshmen. These courses aim to develop the interest of students. For example, the evolution of computer courses is a discipline history course. Professor Liu said, most students have never seen this kind of storage materials before. It makes students understand that we store the hardware in the past and store the software at present. With the historical significance of connections, the discipline courses held in our museum reflect the development of science and technology better, draw students' attention in their majors, and help establish their historical view in science and technology. And what's more, except the engineering students in our university, we want to expand the power of science and technology to more students. Therefore, we invite the course Physics for Humanity into our museum, fostering scientific literacy, hopefully. Student Li Jia said, "It breaks my fear to understand science and technology. Meanwhile, it broadened the way to understand the world." The second type is 2 introduction courses of major, which are mainly for the seniors. Professors introduce the structure and the connotation of the major, which make them know the major deeper. The course of introduction to integrated circuits includes IC design and manufacture. Professors use IC connections of silicon ingot, wafer, mask aligner, and other circuits to show the manufacture process. The third category is 3 engineering courses. which are mainly for senior students. These courses help students to know how to research. In the course of classical experimental recovery, it's a practical course. We have several projects now. The first one is a Hertz experiment. The other is Enigma machine recovery. Students in groups search the literature, then try to model it in 3D. The students finished the mechanical part with 3D printing technology. With the help of experiment and the connections in our museum, students can lay the foundation of technology and learn to research. Now they learn by doing rather than by listening. The other course, Science and Technology, English Interpretation, is started in our museum. Students learn the language technique and then choose an object to tell its story in English. Others are teachers, classmates, and teenagers from high school. Students, one teen said, is quite different from our class before. Through this, we improve English interpretation technique in science and technology dimension. The last type of the class is 2 ethics courses, which are available for all students in our university. After the history, introduction, and engineering courses, they need to know the boundary of the science and the technology research and the application. The appropriate courses open in our museum mainly is object-based learning with the help of connections in different contexts. We design 4 kinds of courses. They are designed for different levels of freshmen, senior students, and all students to deal with the problem of interest, understanding, research, and the boundaries. We discover the rule and all the nature of museum education gradually through the practice. Hopefully, with this model, we can explore more methods in teaching to connect university museum with the university institutions and the students. The second series of courses is the History of Electronic Science and Technology held by us. It includes 7 parts which correspond to our connections. This course combines the online and offline resources. We used live cast at the early period of COVID-19, and we just opened MOOCs for public learners around the country. In MOOCs, anyone can log in and watch the short time videos. They will get a test to check their understanding. They then discuss with teachers and the students. At last, they need to submit a piece of paper about their thoughts. Now we have 35-70 participants since 2020. Other form is class offline with discussion and research. In 2019, we invited Mata to start a course at University Museum and connections research. Other students use method to learn as object-based learning, not only in the connection research, but also in engineering research. At last, they display their ideas in different forms. The different backgrounds make them think in an interdisciplinary way. This is feedback of our course from the students. Some are good, some give us more inspiration to improve it. The course of the History of Electronic Science and Technology gives teaching at different levels with the help of digital methods, breaking the boundaries between university museums and the society. And the museums integrate with to the public. What do we want to achieve in those courses? Those who explore the future of technology should also understand the past. The second point is people who let technology truly integrate to their lives and know the boundary of research and application can be creative. Museums and connections are the hub of the past and present and the future. And what's next? We plan to invite more courses for better taking advantage of all the connections and to explore better interdisciplinary integration and to make students as our partners or the casts of the courses. And at last, we would like to figure out a better balance between online and offline teaching. Here's a bibliography, and that's all from me. Thank you so much, and apologize again for the technical problems. Thank you.
Thank you, Zhao. It just shows that we are human. we expect technological mistakes. Thank you so much. I've seen one of your photographs that one of your students is Marta. If I was correct identifying her. Please keep in your chats. These are absolutely fascinating and diverse food for thought from museum perspectives. We have a similar module within our university where we have engineering students taking on cultural courses and introducing them to the arts and history and heritage. And that's finding that balance between the two has been very useful. I really like the fact that you've included an ethics course. I think that's absolutely great. I do have questions, but I will keep them like everybody else till the end of the talk. Thank you very, very much for your presentation. Everything came across very clearly, and thank you for sticking to time. For everybody, please, I see there's very few chats. Please keep your questions, keep putting them in the chat, because we're going to rely on that chat at the end of the session to open debate about what has been presented in this session as new ways of teaching. And I definitely think our speakers so far have been spot on with what they've been presenting. So, okay, thank you. You can close your screen before we move on to our last speaker. There does seem to appear a slight discrepancy between circulated programs and people, because according to the journal, there was meant to be another Maya Weber out of touch from Germany, but that might have just been another communication error, Martin. I'm sorry about that. But we're going to move on to our last speaker. So, okay, can you please exit, or Martin, can we exit him, please?
He has exited already for,
there you
I think, everybody
Thank
else.
You. Thank you. I'd like to introduce once again the National Museum of Singapore, Fang-Tze. Fang-Tze. I'm sorry if I'm really messing your name up.
No, not at all. Your pronunciation is beautifully accurate. Thank you. Thank you for the organizational effort, and thank you for my wonderful panel discussions. This is a wonderful presentation to learn from all the experiences. Somehow I feel my presentation on the context of new ways of teaching sounds like a dinosaur, because my approach is coming back to the museum. We have a luxurious window early this year. The COVID seems to be eased a little bit in Singapore, so we have this chance to bring students back to the classroom. So my sharing on the topic of whose microhistories, pursuing historical literacy in and beyond the classroom, has very much based on, I think, the necessity still to keep the physical spaces of a university museum, and why we need to bring students back to the museum spaces, and how museum spaces actually allow students to re-engage with that physicalities beyond just screen learning experiences. All right, so I will start my presentation with 3 simple tasks I'm hoping to be able to discuss and cover throughout this very short 10-minute presentation. So I think start with this necessity of defining who really needs historicity, this notion of historical literacy. I mean, in a sense, this is my own teaching experiences. I teach a module on creativity, culture, and cultural study. So I do have students who coming from diverse background. So in a sense, I do have several students from engineering and bioengineering in the past few years. And my answer will absolutely, without doubt, say, yes, everybody needs historical literacy, and I'll explain a little bit why. And I want to define particularly what's university museum's role. And this is very much conditioned by, I think, a very privileged position, I mean, Singapore does have a small, you know, opening on, you know, going back to the classroom, going back to the museum at this moment. So just a disclaimer, this is very, you know, site specific and, you know, conditioned by the ability to be able to move out and going back to the classroom. And I think my final point is to speak a little bit more on how to very much enrich students' learning experiences, and in a sense, how to apply the kind of contextualized historical method in their everyday life and their further learning journey in the university, regardless of their discipline. So the notion of historical literacy, there are multiple literatures out there. If you're interested, I think there's a few such as Philip Roberts from Historical Literacy to Pedagogy of History. And for instance, I think Peter Lee's essay on history, education, and historical literacy are very relevant topic if you're interested on this notion of historical literacy. And I also provide a quotation right here by this wonderful essay written by a scholar. Her name is Aja Vitar, who is talking about historical literacy, thinking, reading, understanding history. And the interesting bit for this observation, because I'm teaching from communication, new media, and cultural study perspective, and my approach for this notion of historical literacy is also coming from a more multidisciplinary and transdisciplinary approach in terms of learning environment. So I'm kind of want to move beyond how we usually understand historical literacy from history as one single discipline, but as a very important capacity and ability to train our student. So I kind of summarize all this literary material I mentioned to kind of pinpoint few aspects, I think, what we can actually provide and actually cultivate our student to have this so-called historical literacy. Just like media literacy, they know how to navigate with social media, so far and so forth. But I think historical literacy is have a better situated understanding of their own practices and their learning. So I kind of want to break down into 4 aspects. First of all, to think historically. This sounds very abstract. I will give you further example in my subsequent slides. And I think very crucial to analyze whatever subject they're engaging with a time-space specificity. I think it comes back to what curators in the museum has to do, always coming back to a sense of care to the object you're dealing with, and how do you bring that aspect back to the classroom and remind the student not to isolate what they are dealing with, what they are studying with, regardless of the method, regardless of the discipline they are situated in. And I think most crucial training, and I think the know-how is to how to transform the kind of factual information into relevant knowledges. One of the immediate questions whenever we open an exhibition, it might be a remote history from Okinawa, have nothing to do with Singapore. But I think there's something quite precious we'll be able to, you know, engage with our student to think about all this intimate historical connectivities that doesn't really on the surface level, and allow them to think about other relevant connectivity which may not appear, you know, just on the, you know, regular news consumption or on the regular so-called knowledge production system. So alternative independent thinking can be cultivated through this particular aspect. Most importantly, I think to allow them to zoom in and zoom out, which I refer as a kind of scalability of understanding of the situation. So those are my kind of summary from all the literature I mentioned to pinpoint the few 4 aspects of the know-how on historical literacy. So I think this particular case study is also situated with NUS Museum, and my colleague Marianne has provided quite a resourceful understanding of the museum itself. I won't go in beyond on this particular description on what the museum is about. But for us, we do, as a museum, we do have a very unique identity. Our collection itself speaks to a complex geopolitical history. So this is also the reason why, as a curator, as a teacher on campus, I think our goal and as a team has always been trying to indicate the broader historical contextualization on our curatorial and on our pedagogical engagement and collaboration with teachers, regardless of discipline on campus. So maybe I should bring you into the classroom, into some examples. So one of the examples I want to point out here is how can we engage with students in specific exhibition. And this exhibition has opened last year. The title is called Wishful Images When Microhistory Take Form. And the exhibition itself is a continuation of a historical inquiry of our own exhibition, which is about Vietnam War, a very tremendous, important historical event in Southeast Asia. So our role is also to relate everyone in the present to understand the relevancy of that historical ripple effect throughout the region and the present. So when we say historical incident, when we say historical event, our job, whether it's on campus education or greater public education, our role is always to recalibrate the understanding of the history in the present in this particular sense, and ensure the notion of contemporaneity. For me, the point of bringing students back to the classroom to either have a hybrid case, whether we have a lecture in Zoom and then bring students to small group discussion. So I think there are a few focus I want to address here. So as mentioned by Zhao, I think the object-based learning is very crucial experiences, regardless you are talking about history of technology or history of human. But I do think in a humanities study, the type of object learning experiences allow students to move beyond their constant mediated everyday environment, especially when we're dealing with Generation Z. And I do think the kind of material history can be able to translate through that kind of haptic experiences. We engage with artifact and materials is very crucial, especially with art and art history per se. And most importantly, although we are in the position of curator, but I think nowadays, as the New York Times have mentioned, everybody's a curator nowadays. So I think it's even more crucial for us to think about what exactly when we mean when we are thinking as a curator. What does that mean when we think like curator? You may want to, if you're interested on this topic on curatorial thinking, I do think John Paul Martino's essay on this essay of thesis in philosophy of curating will be very relevant. But fundamentally speaking, it is about a reflexive standing of looking at the subject and object. So when you take a position, you're actually making decision on your co-relationship with object and subject twice. So curatorial thinking is also crucial, and how can students engage with that experiences in the gallery spaces throughout seminar, throughout facilitated thematic discussion. I think that's something when we will be able to go back to the museum, this is something we can definitely kind of facilitate it. And then we are thinking about creative problem solving, but most importantly is creative problem finding through the object-based learning experiences. So I think finally gone to the point for them to reflexively thinking about their own relationship with knowledge per se. Due to a time constraint, I won't be able to go into a detail, but this is one of the example of how we engage with historical archival material in the exhibition, and how we engage with students with an object, with a wooden sample, a history of bio or botanic garden history in Singapore, with the kind of understanding of Singapore's history in a long trajectory beyond human beings. So this can further goes into the kind of post-human discussion, but I won't dive this further into it because the time constraint. So, I mean, finally, I think I'll just use a very little 30 seconds to speak a little bit on the contextual historical method. I think what I'm trying to address here is a final dimension of object-based learning experiences and the importance to still keep a physical museum spaces for learning and classroom engagement. I think what we can actually facilitate, and very crucially, is in this Web 2.0 learning environment, without this physical engagement and the complexity of this kind of multimedia exposure to, almost the kind of geopolitical media specificity in those exhibitions, I think that in a sense, students will not have a chance to really engage to understanding. I mean, in a sense, in the discipline, in the multidiscipline of of when art and science have always need to talk to each other, I think it's quite important for students to understanding the kind of cultural semiotics behind all these materialities when it comes to artistic media or the media of representation. So I think I will just end my presentation here, and I'm welcome questions. I'm happy to clarify with my presentation. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Excellent presentation. Great food for thought. And on a very different level, it's by no means dinosaur Jurassic Park for sure. It's very different to the others, but please, it's so relevant to what you're saying, and getting students to think more critically within historical legacies is universal. So thank you very much to our speakers today. Martin, I'm correct, that is the last of our speakers. We have still a bit of time before 1 o'clock, before our break. I'm just going to scroll. Let me actually go to the participants. Is there anyone in particular who would like to raise a question before I look at the questions in the chat? Please raise your hand.
There's a few other ones in the cards.
Are there any questions? Let me just see if there's any questions. I'm sorry, I can't seem to get it onto my screen. Question from Fang-Tze. Did you have any specific activities which helped students move into a state where they could engage in an emotional and sensory way? This is for Fang-Tze, for your last speaker. Do you see the chat?
Answer? Yeah, I see the chat. Should I answer on the spot,
Please
like
answer.
right now?
Yes.
Yes. So thank you, Ray Smith, for your wonderful question. One of the specific way of engaging with students is one of the slide I show in my presentation. I won't, due to the time limit, I didn't go into a detail. It's actually wooden sample from 18th century botanic garden in Singapore. So during the colonial era, when colonial government, British government arrived in the first place, they established this taxonomy of wood. So when we have this conversation in cultural study talking about post-humanism, it's actually very difficult for students to relate that with their own experiences. However, with this archival material, especially its historical relevancy from the whole own Singapore's history, I think student was able to have a very close look of this precious material. And I think most importantly, because the early inscription on the wooden sample actually mixed with Malay and Latin words. So we do have that very beautiful moment where our Malay student was able to tell stories of how those, Malay related mythology has relayed to this particular type of woods. So the kind of conversation will be able to, I think, stimulate that through this kind of material was quite precious and crucial, I think, in the kind of multicultural society in Singapore in this particular case. So I think this is one of the practice I usually engage with students. And I think this is very unique in a sense because Singapore is also, we do have this multiracial, multicultural background in the classroom setting.
Thank you for that question. I have another question from, is it Rye Smith, to Sofia in Italy. Apologize for my ignorance because not everyone knows what MOOCs are, what the acronym actually stands for. But they would like she or he, Rye Smith, please could you give more detail about your audience profile for your MOOCs and reflect on ways that they could adapt them to new and attracting new audiences. Do you see the question, Sophia, in the chat box?
Yes, I see the question. Thank you very much.
Thank you. To Rai.
So I don't think we have a specific audience. If we can say that people enrolled on MOOCs are a specific audience with specific, very, very specific geographical or demographic statistics. I think it depends on on the type of the product. We have MOOCs that are for orientation, so we have more students that still are going to school, or we have MOOCs for university students, so we have students that are enrolled on the university. Then we have MOOCs for professionals. So here we have people and lifelong learning. So we have middle-aged people or people who want to work on their career. So it depends on the kind of product. Of course, if, for example, we're talking about STEM courses, we have, as also in the physical class, here we have more men than women. It's actually the same kind of as it happens in the physical class. Of course, if we have more advanced technical courses like data visualization or data analysis, here we see that we have, for example, people that do have an advanced degree. So this kind of courses are more with people with advanced degree, more men, but it has the same demographics as we could say in a natural course. At the same time, I think we should look more on our needs and on our objectives in order to decide what kind of MOOC we would like to produce. For example, if we do a program for teachers and we did on-site on the museum, maybe we could think like a learning program for teachers that could reach teachers around the world, because they do have this kind of need, and we do have this specific thing on our museum that is correlated. So this could be a target audience, for example. Then we could decide to do it on our own platform, an open source like Moodle, or we could go to a platform already exists like edX or Coursera, or depending on when we're staying, there are other platforms as well. And this has other benefits, other costs. I think, yes, that's it. I'm not sure if I responded to the question as if you understand. If you want more details, I can go on.
Thank you very much, Sophia. I'm very impressed with this session because many of these papers would really do well to be published so they can get wider reach. Please do consider submitting these for the UMAC journal so we can engage deeper, because all of you have gone to so much trouble with your presentations. And I know trying to squeeze all that information into a short amount of time is quite difficult. I just want to turn to Zhao. There was a question earlier from Nikki Reeves for you, and I was also surprised that your museum is very new and you only opened in 2016, and you also state that you have about 14,000 objects. Nikki asks, can you tell us how you managed to collect 14,000 objects in such a short period of time? Where did they come from? What criteria did you use? And perhaps I can add to that, is your collection still growing?
Okay, thank you, Sian. You can hear me, right? Sian?
Yes, we can.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for the question, Nikki. That's a very interesting question, because most of the time when I did the presentation, there must one who asked this kind of question. Yes, because in 2015, that's the time actually we started the project, and we spent just 1.5 years to establish the museum, because we in 2015 we already had a building. Yes, so 1.5 years just for collecting and curating, and we have over, let me count, we have over 200,000 alumni in our country of the university. Yes, so we have a huge resources. So we visited all the factories and the research institutions around the country. It's about over 201, and 101 institutions donated their objects or their products, or the old instruments, to us. So I would like to say that's the power from our alumni and from the industry, the electronic industry, because at the beginning we just have 20 objects from our university. It's the old heritage of the university. we moved from one place to the new campus, so we lost most of them. It's a pity, but we got more from the electronic industry, and the 95% of the objects are from the factories, the research institutions, and some donators. So that's very great. And what is criterion? At the beginning, we just have very tough, very honestly speaking, we just want more objects. So the criterion is not that specific. But now with the development of the museum, we are changing the criterion. So that's the answer for Nikki. And I also see the question about Lord's, what Lord said. Oh, okay. It breaks my the fear of science and technology. It's for the humanities students, because in our university, some students from humanity majors, they are afraid of science and technology because they cannot understand. So we take measures. We use some soft methods or some interesting course to attract them to the museum and to help them understand the science and the technology. So the student said, it breaks my fear of science and technology. That's it. And what's your question, Sian? How has a new model embraced for IR?
Yes,
you mean
how has your model of museum and class embraced the fourth industrial revolution? Because that's also from a museological perspective for those who are not in the sciences. The moment you mention the fourth industrial revolution, they say, oh, I don't know anything about that. So how do you ensure something like 4IR is cross-disciplinary, transdisciplinary? Is it something that you deal with as part of this model?
It's hard to say. It's hard to tell. And we just taught the students in a point of view that is the timeline of their study time in the university. For freshmen, for sophomore, for the senior student, or for the graduate students, what do they need? What do they need at that time? So what can we do for us, for the museum, for the university museum? We can offer or we can provide to them. So maybe that's the answer. Thank you, Sian.
Thank you. I think the idea of your questions is, does your museum have enough space? You'll have to continue changing your collections policy in this rapidly changing world we live in. I'm just wondering, and I'm sure everybody else is, at what point do you say enough is enough? And it's wonderful that it's all being donated by the industry, but you also have to get to a point to say, we can't take any more, you know?
Yes, because our storage is already full, but it's another opportunity for us to get more space. To ask for more space from the president. So every time when I want more space, I take the president. Hey, hello, Mr. President, please come with me and let's see the full storage, you know. Yes, thank you, Sian.
Wonderful sentiment. Thank you.
Thank you.
Right, thank you for everybody for attending this session. We are 10 minutes early. Thank you to our 4 speakers, Marianne, Zhao, Sofia, and Fang-Tze. Very enticing, and I'm actually quite, what's the word? I'm really impressed with the good quality, the level of research for each of your presentations, and encourage you to publish them. A lot of them are new. So for example, I was asking, are there other museums like this worldwide? A lot of what Marianne has touched on as part of our digital futures in museum programming, the fact that you're bringing the digital closer to the curatorial, and that the digital is sometimes still seen as a fear amongst many other people, and it shouldn't be seen as a fear. I'm obviously speaking from an African continent point of view, because they immediately, we don't have the digital resources, we don't have that. But just looking at your presentations, I've already tapped into very many good ideas. Steph was also commenting on history is not as linear, history has changed. It's not his story, but her story nowadays. I just think this has been a fantastic session. I'm going to ask anyone to raise the opportunity to raise their hand for one last question, if they'd like to, before I close the session, or their story. Here's Sarah, or their story. Any last questions at this stage? I think you will have at least a 10-minute break before we break. Martin, am I correct? 1 o'clock?
No, there is no an official half an hour break. So
it's now official a half an hour break.
Yes. So first I stop recording, or is there a question? Because
are there any last questions? Speak now, forever hold your peace, as they say.
It's a good one.
I'm trying to get everyone on screen. 36 participants. There's another new 2 chats. Let me just quickly have a chat.
Yeah, it's not
Thank
a question,
you.
I think. No.
Thank you. These certainly were provocations, good provocations. Thank you to all the people attending as well, and for good listening, and to our speakers. And Martin, thank you very much for the technical support. I was a bit worried because I'm completely Zoom illiterate. Thank you so much. Please enjoy the rest of the conference and your break, and we look forward to the presentation. Please, we'll see you at 1:30 on the spot, if I'm correct. Thank you very much, everybody. Have a good day, good morning, good evening. See if you can squeeze in a 10-minute nap or a 10-minute lunchtime. Thank you so much.
Thank you.